Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a seasoned business executive as well as a best selling thriller author, no other than Mr. AJ Tyler.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, welcome again, Mr. AJ, and thank you so much for being part on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And again, thank you very much for having me. I was a CPA and attorney. I had a law degree, a master's of law degree. I ran a big accounting firm. I did turnaround consulting for many years. And for the last 3 years, I've focused my life on writing novels, which is a passion and a love I have. Um, and finally decided to chase that love because today there's no tomorrow's promised to no one, and today is too short to not chase your dreams. So this is my dream. I finished Death Insured and released it last year. That's my first novel. The second one, Debt Discharge, is coming out probably the end of this year or early in 2026. It's in process now. And every day I get up and I think about writing, and I think about business, and I think about murder.
Interesting, Mr. AJ, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books advocacy to come. So tell us, we're gonna talk about today the interplay between business and murder. What is all about?
So So there is throughout the history of novels, there have been any number of novels, excuse me, where money is the driving factor in the commission of murders in the thriller mystery section. Um, Even more so when you start to look at business partners killing each other, people killing each other. In the case of Death Insured, murders are being committed to collect on insurance. In the case of Debt Discharge, the next book, murders are being committed for revenge, but there's a business element to it. But throughout history of the mystery and the thriller, there has always been this interplay of business and murder because business means money, and murder for money is the most common theme in mysteries and thriller, other than for revenge or love.
Yes, for sure. And Mr. AJ, tell us, beyond the obvious, what are some of the more surprising or nuanced business motivations you've encountered for murder?
Well, there's a real life story here in Boca Raton, near where I live. A few years ago, there was a lawyer who practiced with his father. The lawyer was stealing money from the client trust account. The father discovered it, called the lawyer out on it, his son, and threatened to go to the authorities. The son murdered him, and the son ended up being arrested. And while waiting for trial, committed suicide. This isn't a made up story. This is a real story. But the motivation was money, the motivation was business, the motivation was control. And that's probably on the more absurd side because it's a son killing his father because of business and money.
Business and money, for sure, the motivation. So, how does the cold, calculative, and profit driven mindset required in high stakes business potentially condition someone to see a murder as just another strategic option or risk mitigation?
Well, I think when you look at anyone that commits murder, there's a moral imperative or a moral issue that rises up. And when people put more value on money and power than they do on ethics and morals, that's how that occurs. If you look at throughout history, it has happened that way, and throughout business, it has happened that way. Now, when writers write novels, we may exaggerate the fight for power within a company by adding a murder to it. But fights for power within corporate control in big companies, in little companies, in family businesses. I used to do estate planning, and there would be fights over control of the entity after the founding father or mother passed away. Now, there wasn't a murder, but there were fights that could have led to that moral decision that had to be made. Could I keep fighting this fight, or do I need to take it to a whole nother level, commit a murder, or take them out of the equation?
Interesting, Mr. AJ. In case you have studied, is there often a progression from white collar crime to violence, or does the decision to murder usually comes to this drastic leap?
Well, when you do the research, you find that most white collar criminals don't escalate. It's not a gateway to violent crime. They're embezzlers, they're swindlers, they have Ponzi schemes, whatever it may be. And while they may not kill to protect themselves, oftentimes a lot of those people, when they get caught, will commit suicide to avoid the implications. However, in the case of the lawyers I told you about, the father and son, the son escalated that, believing that if he killed the father and it looked like the father had been killed by a third party, that maybe it would hide the embezzlement that he was doing, because then he would be in complete control of the entity. So it has the ability to escalate. It doesn't escalate that often, at least in the research I've done so far in that arena.
Interesting, Mr. AJ. Business often use language that dehumanize competition. How does the language potentially create a psychological framework where literal dehumanization becomes thinkable?
Well, I think that what ends up happening is, when you look at the language and you look at the competition in business, oftentimes people lose sight of the morality, like I said earlier, because they're so busy being focused on the money, the end goal, the power, the control. I like to say it's losing sight of the forest for the trees, and they people get so caught up in that competition that, to the extent that it does lead to violence or murder, it's because they lose sight of what is important. In everyday life, we face these decisions every day, moral decisions about things we do and how we're going to do them. And in business, even more so, because if you're running a large organization and you have 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 employees, you have to think about the long range implications, not just on yourself, but every one of those people. That's an enormous amount of pressure for somebody running a business. And take the we you say language, I think it a little bit differently. You take that interplay and you have to decide how that interplay is going to interact with the moral decisions you make every day on behalf of yourself, your employees, and your family.
Mr. AJ, from an investigative standpoint, what makes a business involved murder so much harder to solve than a crime of passion?
Um, Good question. And I don't know that I have an easy answer for you to that. I think, one of the things is that there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, numbers involved. There's business records. If, a crime of passion is usually between two people, and those two people have some level of interplay. Maybe there's a third party involved. If there's infidelity, so it's an angry husband or an angry wife takes out a spouse for cheating, or a spouse and their lover for cheating. In business, you have to work your way through the numbers, because it may look like it's innocent, and then you work your way through the financial information and you realize it's a much deeper, much more intense, much more embedded and hidden conspiracy. And then if you find that conspiracy, if you find that conspiracy, then the issue is how the person who's committing that crime, how they respond to it. And that's when the interplay between business and murder comes into play.
Mr. AJ, tell us, there a trope of hiring a professional. In reality, how do business principals often try to orchestrate murder without directly getting their hands dirty?
Well, now we're talking about that. That's a whole nother scenario, and that is how is reaching out through, I don't want to say the black market, that wouldn't be the appropriate term, but reaching out now with the internet and with the and with all of the social media and things like that, it's become much easier for people to reach out into the world and find people to do their bidding for money. Every day, I'm sure all of your viewers are deluged with spam emails and scam texts and scam whatever. That's at the minimal level. At the maximum level, it's reaching out through the internet, putting a coded message, if you will, whether it's on a social media page or a place like Backdoor or wherever, that you're looking for someone to assist you with, in the term that I would use if I was writing this, disposal of an asset. And then when they contact you, you have to speak in code because you never know who you're speaking to. It could be an undercover police officer, it could be an actual murder for hire individual.
Mr. AJ, Death Insured, can you tell us about this book of yours?
Sure. So, Death Insured is the first in a series of what will be three books where murder and money are at play. In the case of Death Insured, there is a company that buys insurance policies. The product's called a viatical, where they're betting on when their clients are going to die. Many times, people who have chronic and terminal diseases need access to the values in their insurance policies, and oftentimes more value than the cash surrender value. So they'll buy the policy for the discounted present value of the death benefit. That means they're basically betting on when you're going to die. If you're 50 and you have $1 million policy, they may give you $200,000, but they're hoping you're going to die long before age 72. Now, in addition to that, the Viatical company has a sister charity, and that charity is giving money to people, finding out the ones that have terminal illnesses. And two people from the charity and the company are killing these people for the money. That's the basic concept. Overlay that with a manipulative woman who is controlling the guy who's actually committing most of the murders. She's betraying him. There's lies, betrayal, and they are discovered by a forensic specialist whose cousin dies mysteriously before she was supposed to die based on her illness. And it starts an investigation where the coroner and the forensic specialist join together. They find romance, but they also find a series of murders that they go about solving.
Interesting indeed, Mr. AJ. And how did you connect to the first book that you wrote?
I was back when I was doing consulting many years ago. I was asked by a client to do a research on a viatical because he had many insurance policies. He didn't want to just cancel them. He wanted to try and take cash out, but there wasn't enough cash in there for him to cash the policy in. So I did the research for him on viaticals. Back in 2005, my wife passed away from cancer, and I watched as I would take her for treatments and go to the hospital and the cancer centers, the number of people that struggled financially dealing with the cost of the disease, the things that weren't covered by insurance, or if they didn't have good insurance. And that made me start to think about how easy it was if someone owned the policy and they knew that the person was dying of cancer and it was terminal, there was a way to kill them in a completely undetectable way. And if you could do that and make it look like their disease, no one would be the wiser and the company would collect the money. That's the concept behind Death Insured, and that's where it came from.
Interesting, Mr. AJ. Connecting those dots is something else. In these cases, is a breakthrough for investigators more often a forensic slip up or a financial or a trail, a change contract will derail for having these investigators.
Well, it's funny because the way the trigger that starts the analytics guy looking at his cousin's death was an innocent comment made by her oncologist who said while she had a terminal disease and she wasn't getting better, he thought she had more time. So that starts a discussion between the Alan Miller, our hero, and the coroner, Larry Shapiro. And from that conversation, Miller then has a series of coincidences, and he does not believe in coincidence, nor do I. And one of them is he meets the people from the company that bought his cousin's policy and the charity that gave her the money. And that raises his suspicions, and he goes off investigating them. Oftentimes, I've been told by friends who have served in police forces and investigative roles that the way that they discover a crime is something either stupid or missed or ignored by the person committing that crime. And oftentimes that leads to wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. In the case of this, Miller is constantly saying, A, I don't believe in coincidences, and B, follow the money. Those are his two set things he always says.
Follow the money for sure. It's all about money, money, money for
Yeah.
sure, Mr. AJ. And how have a complex corporate structures, shell companies, or international holdings have been used not just as tax evasion but obfuscate motives to hide relationships and complicate murder investigations?
Oh, that I would guess at any given time, there are thousands of, I'll use the word schemes going on to hide illicit relationships, to hide wealth. I have a friend that just went through a very complicated divorce, and money was being moved around and spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to find money that the spouse who had the company was hiding and moving to other people. And I think that's an everyday event in divorce. It's an everyday event in business. It's an everyday event in life. So,
Definitely, for sure, event of life. Mr.
yep.
LJ, how does the hierarchy and culture of compliance in corporation mirror the dynamics seen in cases where subordinates are coerced or manipulated into participating in a scheme?
Well, that's an interesting question because it goes back to what I had said earlier about the moral imperative. Uh, there are companies who um, will skirt the rules or dance at the edge of between what's right and what's wrong and coerce their people with money, coerce their people with promotions when they want to cross that line. Oftentimes, if you go to a public company where they're reporting um, their earnings regularly, you'll read about this all the time. These companies that you find out that their financial reporting isn't up to snuff, if you will, and that they had to restate earnings. Oftentimes, the restatement is innocent. But sometimes that restatement is because the CEO or the COO has coerced the financial person to play with the numbers to make the stock look better or to make the earnings look better to drive the stock price. And that I think, is a far more common event than people realize. But it's also an issue that they don't get caught as often because compliance then is about, okay, let's go fix it. We made a mistake and you ask for forgiveness.
Mm, yes, for sure. And Mr. AJ, as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, I'm working on a second book in the Alan Miller series. Alan Miller, as I said, is the hero of Death Insured. The next book is Debt Discharged. I'm pretty well into it. I'm hoping to have it released either before the end of the year, which always makes a nice stocking stuffer, or as does Death Insured, or in the early part of next year. I've got a lot of positive feedback about the characters and the writing from Death Insured, and so I'm carrying some of them over to the next book. And that is also about business, murder, revenge, and money. Our favorite topics. I'm working on another book in a different genre called Please Don't Call Me a Nice Guy. I'm hoping to date you, which is about a gentleman later in life trying to find himself and his happiness after his spouse is gone and his children are grown and off into the world. And I just came up with the concept for the third book in the Alan Miller series, and we'll probably be releasing that sometime. Please Don't Call Me a Nice Guy will be the second quarter of next year. And the third book, which does not have a title yet, but takes place here in South Florida for all my South Florida friends who are going to appear in the book. And that'll be sometime in the third or fourth quarter of next year.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. AJ, and looking forward for more success of all your books. And you are most welcome to
Thank you
come
so
back.
much.
You are
I
always
appreciate that.
yes.
I enjoy talking to you, Daniel. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Definitely 100% on Book 101 review. We support you. And tell us what is your piece of advice for people out there want to be an author like you?
I have every day I get asked questions by people. How did you do this? You have to write every day, whether it's a line, a sentence, a chapter, or 10 chapters. Get up, take a piece of paper or take your computer or the notes section of your phone and write what you're thinking. Put your concept on paper. It doesn't have to be the final concept. I have a friend who is working on a book. It's a quasi memoir novel. And in the course of conversation yesterday, I said, I know you don't want it to be a memoir because there's some very personal things in there, but here's what you need to do. Just write it that way. Until you publish it, everything is personal to you. You always have the chance to edit what you wrote to make it the story that you want to tell. You just have to write. And I know that sounds simplistic, but as I said, if it's thoughts, if it's chapter outlines, if it's a whole chapter, write every day. You're going to finish it eventually because you're going to find that spark, that motivation that makes you want to get up every day and write for an hour or 2 hours and produce what you want to produce.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. AJ. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Okay, so the first book I ever read is the one that made me want that I the first novel I ever read by a great writer was the one that made me want to write. And it took me a very long time to get there. I was 16 years old when I read Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun. It's about a World War I veteran who is injured. He's deaf, he's mute, he's blind, he's been gassed during the war. So the entire book is told in the narrative by the wounded soldier, by the thoughts going on in his head. And it was so moving and it showed me the power of words. That's the first book I say it anyway. You want to read something great, read that. Beyond that, I have some writers I love. I started reading Mysteries with Lawrence Sanders' First Deadly Sin, which was the interplay between murder and a corporate executive. So there's murder in business. And then there are books by writers like Daniel Silva, Greg Iles. I have a good friend, Pablo Zaragoza, who is a great writer, writes amazing books with great detail and depth and vision. And those are all great. Anything by any of those people and those two books I mentioned earlier are a great gateway to reading. But I tell everyone the same thing. Reading seems to have become a lost art. Don't let it be, because when you read, you can be world doing anything while you have those pages open in front of you or you have that Kindle in front of you.
Well, thank you for that recommended books, Mr. AJ. And tell us, why do you think the trope of the murderous businessman is so prevalent in fiction, from Shakespeare to modern thrillers? What the truths does it tap
Um,
into?
it taps into a few things. It taps into the measure that people want power and money over morality, like we talked about earlier. It taps into, and really more than anything, it's power. You know, when I write, there's always a strong narcissistic figure in the book on this evil side. And the thing about narcissists is they create their own narratives, and that's it helps when you're a writer when you can do that, when you have a and someone evil who creates a narrative that's the story that they want to tell, and it also creates an opportunity for your hero to tell the truth. That's why it's so prevalent to see business and murder and narcissism in murder mysteries.
Yes, tell the truth, but nothing but the truth. So,
Yes.
Mr. EJ, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. AJ, tell us, after all your research, what is the most disturbing or profound insight you have gained about the relationship between ambition, money, and human capacity for violence?
Um, I guess the thing that's so that my revelation that was most disturbing is how easy it is for some people to commit acts of evil, not just murder, but any act of evil, and visit it upon other people. I don't think that hate, you're born with hate. I mean, yeah, there are people that have mental illness and are born with that mental illness, and maybe we as a society have to do more to help people that have mental illness. But what I think is more disturbing is, from both my research and from my conversations with people in real life, is how easy people find it to hurt people that they ostensibly love or care about. Yes, it can be incidental and accidental, but there are actual intentional acts. Murders, and I mean, there could be an accidental murder, but that's a one-off. But people who commit murders with malice are doing it with hate in their heart. And I can't imagine having that much hate in your heart that you would want to take the life of another person.
Yes, for sure. Mr. AJ Tyler, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your books, your advocacy, or your upcoming books to come?
So, as I said, we've got Death Insured, which is currently out. Debt Discharge coming soon. And Please Don't Call Me a Nice Guy, I Was Hoping to Date You. You can find them on my website at ajtylerauthor.com. My Instagram and Facebook pages are AJ Tyler Author, and they're on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and Goodreads as well.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. AJ Taylor, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. More and more empowering books to come.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
You are most welcome, Mr. AJ, and more to come, people. See you soon.